Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Edge on Good News Sports. I'm your host, Glenn Allen. According to an online article by a CBC writer in 2003, the average Canadian owed more than their take-home pay. Collectively, we have 74 million credit cards. That's 3 for each person over 18. How you spend your money says a lot about your priorities. Are you an impulse spender? Are your credit cards maxed? Are your finances a mess? How can athletes make so much money and one day have to file for bankruptcy? How can folks work for years only to be left without enough money to live out their golden years? As a man, what are my financial responsibilities to my family? What about you? Do you have a plan? Does money control you? To talk about that and so much more, let's meet the Edge panel here on Good News Sports from the Drew Marshall Radio Show. Drew Marshall, Drew Meister.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
A little something for you there.
Thanks very much. Thank you. A little bit of money. Thank you. Yeah. He is the president of Faith Life Financial, Dieter Kays. Dieter, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Oh, good to have you. From Uptown, I'm keeping this, by the way. From Uptown Sports, NHL player agent, he is the Don Reynolds. How are you, buddy?
Hey, good to be here.
Welcome to the program. And finally, the anchor of this panel, former WWE superstar wrestler, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Good to see you again.
He's the ringer for this show, is he?
He is.
I thought it might have been you, but it's the $1 Million Man.
I got a question for you guys that know all about money. How did the $1 Million Man become the 10-cent kid?
I like that. That was smooth.
Oh,
right on yourself. Well, it's funny because I thought it'd be kind of funny. You know, Ted, you're the $1 Million Man. What are men missing when it comes to financial responsibility?
I don't have a clue. I'm the $1 Million Man in character only. Responsibility. Responsibility. And again, I want to hear a lot about what these guys have to say tonight. I started late. I got into the wrestling industry, started making money, and I spent it as fast as I made it. And when I went to the WWF, now WWE, and saw that opportunity, I was directed to a financial advisor by my accountant. Very godly man, very strong Christian, and I did start saving money and I have a retirement fund, but I started late, and boy, I tell you what, I wish I'd have done a lot of things sooner.
Dieter, I'll direct the first question really to you. I was joking around with Ted, but that's a great answer.
You weren't supposed to answer that.
Yeah, it was rhetorical. No, I'm just kidding. When you look at guys today, why are their finances? What's the first thing that jumps out to mind? Maybe the top 3. Why are guys' finances so messed up?
Women.
Well,
I'm not talking to you.
Oh, sorry.
I think that there are so many priorities that we're bombarded with, and we get so sucked into the kinds of things that everybody else has and what we need, and so we go into debt very quickly to get that car, to get the house, to get the furniture. So I think our wants exceed what we really can reasonably afford, and we don't have a good sense of budgeting. I mean, how many people today really spend time budgeting? Do you budget?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not like I've never budgeted ever.
And I think what I hear you saying is there's a huge difference between what we want and, in fact, what we need.
Absolutely, and I think part of it is you also have to get in touch with what your values are. What's your long-range plan and what's important to you in life. And the trouble is it takes a certain level of maturity to be able to ask those kinds of questions.
Right. If we simply didn't buy the toys, would that be fine? We'd be much better as guys, right? We simply don't buy the toys. Then we'd be good, right? We wouldn't have to be all working 7 jobs and having to budget and go.
What are toys? What's your
definition of toy?
Yeah.
You don't want to know what it is.
No.
The Corvette, the Porsche, the Jaguar.
Yeah. Come on. We all know there's stuff we don't need, but we go for it anyway.
The
Sure.
little toys.
This comes back to our other show, almost like the addiction deal, because I think we're still medicating our lives from the garbage, loneliness, emptiness, I don't know, whatever kind of unresolved Dr. Phil issues we have or something.
Why does it have to be Dr. Phil?
I don't know, because he's bald and I can relate. Right? But do you not think we just do that? We medicate, so we buy junk, and then we're idiots with our money.
I mean, part of it is, it makes us feel good, right, to get a new car. When we're feeling depressed.
Shopping therapy. The women
we
do
go
it.
out, sure, yeah.
And keeping up with the Joneses. Why in 2006, almost 2007, why do we still have to try to keep up with our neighbor? Because they buy something we have to go out and buy. I totally do not. I totally do not do that.
Well, I don't do that. You don't do that. None of us do that, right? Well, we all keep up with you. That's about it. Try to.
But you know what we do is we do have a tendency to compare ourselves to others. You know, I read a study about this guy that was doing research on what makes people happy and how do people feel happy. And he did a study where he asked the question, if you could make $20,000 and everybody else made $10,000, or everybody made $30,000, which would you choose? You know what they said? I'd rather make $20,000 and have everybody else make $10,000, right? Because that makes me feel good.
Is that per month, Dieter?
This was a study that was done years ago.
But that's a great point too. You know, we touched on that talking about some of this the other day, Drew. And my budgeting is so much different than other people's budgeting. But really, when I turned my life around, when I started to turn my life around in '98, one of the best pieces of advice I got
was stop buying Coke.
Yes, turned to Pepsi, and it was. But it was learning how to budget, and part of that was even meal planning, so that I wouldn't walk into. I'm serious. We still meal plan to this day.
Like Jenny Craig meal plan, or
No,
how much?
no. What we're having for what we're going to have on Monday,
I knew
Tuesday,
it wasn't
Wednesday.
the first one.
No,
Maybe
not anymore.
Maybe you should try Jenny Craig.
Yeah.
Let's go with the kettle black
look
now.
at this,
Eh?
Yeah.
Well, you know, we
Blowfish
always,
is on either end of the thing.
Glenn, we always tell our athletes, if your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep will be your downfall.
Who doesn't know that? That's common
Yeah, but
sense.
who doesn't
A
walk
lot of
that out?
people.
If everybody walked that out, we wouldn't have a problem, Dieter.
Right.
I'm telling you, as a young athlete, I mean, and I was guilty of this, and thank God I did wise up, and hopefully I didn't wise up too late. But you know, when you're young and you're going like that, you don't think it's ever going to end. You know, it's kind of like that old Invincible thing. You think you're going to be a star forever, and you just you live like there's never going to be another day.
Well, you look at some of the boxers. I mean, how many boxers have filed for bankruptcy? I mean, from one fight, if they had just put $1 million in a savings account at 3% and left it alone, they could have almost lived on it. And today, but all the countless millions of dollars. I want to direct this to Don. The NHL hockey players. You look at professional sports. How do you make that kind of dough in our society today and declare bankruptcy years down the road?
Well, I think it's easy. There's a tremendous amount of pressure for a young athlete when he first arrives in the dressing room he wants to be like everybody else. There's 20 other guys in the room, and perhaps the fellow sitting beside him is making $5 million and he's making $500,000, and suddenly he'll want to drive the same car as the fellow making $5 million. You know, and
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Well, it's just there's a bit of pressure there, and
it's not pressure if you're grounded. If it's not pressure, Fisher, I interviewed Mike Fisher, and Mike Fisher told me, the Ottawa Senator told me, he says, as a Christian, there is no pressure because each choice I make is one that I line up with God. I don't try to keep up with other people. I don't do things to fit in. I do things to glorify God.
Well, he doesn't do things to fit in, that kind of pressure, because he's a believer and he takes a strong stand on his faith, and it really affects how he lives. But you know, he always has the latest cars and things. I mean, so if we're talking about things, I think that's a...
He does, but he's not buying them to keep up with his teammates. He's buying them, in his case, he buys something
keep up with his agent. Maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. But Todd moved. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, I think that's a really good point. When I think a person gets to a certain level of income, I think in a sense they can afford to become more mature in terms of their priorities.
Yes.
Because they've taken care of an awful lot of what we consider the basics, right? They've got a nice car to drive, they've got a nice house, then they can start thinking about oftentimes what do they do for the future, and how do they begin to share some of that wealth. But I think for the average person who doesn't have a high income, I think it's really important very early on to help our kids learn about the values that drive you, how you make decisions about the resources that God has given you, and begin to put that into a bit of a planning mode. Because it's the person that doesn't, that has the average income that many times has to make hard choices about,
And they are teaching it in high school now. They have classes on finances.
Let me
show
tell
up in
you.
class, though.
Let me tell you a story about high school and financing. You're right. I've got 3 daughters, and a number of years ago, more years than I care to admit, one of my daughters came home and she was in this economics class, and the assignment was build a budget, okay, according to the categories that had been given to her by the teacher. And it was all the traditional stuff. It was housing, it was utilities, car, clothes, entertainment,
Makeup.
vacation, makeup, right?
Groceries.
But I looked at that list and I said, where's charitable giving?
Nice.
Where's church?
The tithe.
And we had this wonderful conversation, she and I, about how our family had certain values, and that as she got older and started her own family, she needed to think about that as well. And just as she was doing now, in terms of putting something in church and that kind of thing. So I think it's values and developing a plan, really critical.
And with that, we're going to go into our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about, we've talked a little bit about the financial planning, but there's other avenues, if you will, that we need to explore, especially as guys, and how we prepare to keep our family secure should something happen to us. We're going to talk about that when we return. More Good News Sports right after this. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Good News Sports. Drew Marshall, Dieter Kays, Don Reynolds, Ted DiBiase. I'm Glenn Allen. Today we're talking about finances and stewardship.
What was the second word?
Stewardship.
It's a good word.
That's a good word. Dieter, can you explain it to Drew, please?
Well, seriously, when stewardship gets thrown around an awful lot, and a lot of times in secular society now it means, we're going to really look after this company, or we're going to use our money wisely. But when a Christian uses the word stewardship, which is really, we own that term in the sense of where it came from, it really means being a manager of everything that God has given you.
Time,
money. The earth, the gifts that you have.
The earth?
Yeah.
What are you, from BC?
The trees.
Don't you recycle?
I do, yes. Yeah. Take all my beer bottles back every week.
There you go.
That's good.
Guys, let me ask you this. Who has been through a major financial struggle? And how did it impact your marriage?
Put your hand up.
How did it impact your marriage, and how did you get through it? And we'll start with Ted.
When I stopped wrestling and injured my neck and went from wrestling to full-time ministry, it was a huge change in income. Matter of fact, my financial advisor said, he says, Ted, you realize that you're making this change in your life at the point in time in your life when your expenditure will be greater than it ever will be the rest of your life. In other words, my kids were coming of the age to go to college and get cars and all those other things, and I said, I realized that. And that's really when I had to start being a micromanager. And it was a tough adjustment for us. I mean, and I've got a good 401k.
Which in Canada means?
It's a retirement fund.
RRSP.
Yeah. And it's sitting there, and I would like to be able to put a lot more in it, but right now, matter of fact, originally it was like, well, let's get you to 55, and that was the original plan. I quit wrestling. He said, well, now you got to get to 60, 65, before you can do anything about it. But the one thing that is in this plan is if something happens to me, if I die unexpectedly, then my family's taken care of. My house is paid off, and my wife, gets a lot of money.
Speaking of that, your wife actually called me the other day and wants me to take care of something. I'll call Guido and the boys. And
That's drewmarshall.ca.
Isn't he terrible?
Don, 2004 lockout was an adjustment for you and your family,
right.
as NHL player
That's
agents.
right. We went probably about 18 months with no income.
Wow.
And we had to change our office location. We didn't have to, but we did it as a
Downsize.
That's right.
That's the word of the 2000.
That's
downsizing.
right. That's right. But I think advisors are important. The Bible says there's wisdom in the counsel of many. Sorry to get Bible thumping on you there, Drew. But I think you need help You need to go to a man like Dieter here or people in his company who are financial advisors. You need a good accountant. You need to talk to others. You know, I don't think there's that much teaching in the church today.
It's not, have you watched Jesus Television? They talk about money all the time.
Well, they just want you to send it in. But they're not showing you really, I think, how to be good stewards and how to be circumspect in your thinking when it comes to money. So I would really say that, you know, you need to get good people around you to help you.
Dieter, you're the president of Faith Life Financial, and yet when we talk about going through struggles, you're one of the guys that say, yeah, we've been there, done that. Talk a little bit about that, because guys need to hear that.
Well, in my own background, you know, I was born into an immigrant family, so we didn't have a lot when we moved to Canada in 1954. And I suppose the blessing for me is that, you know, I've never been unemployed, and every year my life has gotten a little bit better financially. So, you know, we've never had a lot of, we've never lived beyond our means, but we struggled in the early years. Like, you know, I basically figured I would grow up to be a pastor. And when I graduated from seminary, you know, the first few years were hard when you had 3 kids and a very limited income. Mortgage payments, and
you look at the plate that comes around, you say, sorry folks, that's going around again.
That's not how it works.
No, can't do that.
Was there any teaching in seminary about it?
No, and I suspect that that's still the area where we fall down in terms of really helping our seminarians and pastors that are coming out of seminary understand what it means to be good stewards and to be good financial planners.
I got a little teaching when I started into being an itinerant, you know, evangelist. My spiritual daddies told me, they said, Ted, they said, you go for those love offerings, just I want to warn you ahead of time, you're going to get a whole lot of love and not much offering.
You brought up delayed gratification.
Yeah, I'm trying to teach my kids that, because our kids...
What does that mean?
Well, we're living in a narcissistic environment right now, and especially in North America. We're professional navel gazers. We want what we want. We're all sucks and spoiled, and I just came back from Nicaragua with my 13-year-old daughter, and they've got nothing, and they're living joyful lives. A lot of them are. A lot of them are still hurting, obviously. But so I'm trying to teach my kids, okay, well, it's fine to want something, but just chill for a bit, all right? You may not want it in 2 months, number one. Number two, maybe you could do something like save for it. I don't know, try that one, you know, delayed gratification. I think we got to start teaching our kids early that, because when they leave the home and they start spending their money hand over fist, they're going to call you and you're going to be put out again anyway, right? You know, they're going to suck the cash right out of you later. Speaking
of that, I mean, how crazy has Christmas gotten? With our world and the spending, the credit cards that get maxed out. I mean, in our house, our kids get one thing.
Yeah.
Because for us, and I know for everybody sitting around this table, I mean, the reason for the season is obviously Jesus Christ. Yeah. And the world has lost the focus on that. But people are paying off. It's taking them. They're just getting it paid off, and Christmas is coming around the corner again. And the whole delayed gratification, it's so true. In our house, hey, if we don't have it, we don't buy it.
And you know, the other nice idea that I think a lot of families are starting to get into is to think about charities at Christmas time. Yeah. And say, you know what?
Yeah, that's a great point.
We could buy our kids or buy each other another present. Or what we could do is we could...
sponsor a child.
Sponsor a child. Right. We could buy a pair of goats that would feed a family in a third world country.
From Drew, you've got some goats in the backyard, haven't you?
You selling them?
Send them over.
You selling your goats again?
I really wish you wouldn't talk about my kids like that.
One of the things that impacted my life, and in turn has impacted one of my sons who's gone on a couple of mission trips. I've been now to India 3 times on mission trips. Wow. And to go there and see it and live it. It's one thing to turn on the TV and see the plea for children, and you see the kids with the bloated bellies and flies on their face and everything. But when you're standing on the street in Bombay, India, you know, and that little boy's looking in your face, and you can smell the raw sewage in the street, and he's got his hand out, and he's looking right in your eye. It makes it also very real.
This segues for me into another topic which drives me bonkers is filthy rich Christians. Now, I know you guys are probably, you know, you got nice suits. I put a tie on, especially because I knew you were coming and stuff. And, you know, you're a showbiz guy, and you're
Me.
You're you.
What do you mean showbiz?
Well, you know what I mean. But I really have a problem with the phrase rich Christians. I have a problem, especially with the preachers. I do have a problem with the TV preachers and what they're wearing and living in their fancy houses. I will stand on that one all the time. Drives me bonkers.
But don't you think it's all relative? A pastor of a
None
church
of my
over
relatives
here,
are rich, man.
a pastor over here makes $30,000 a year, and a pastor over here makes $130,000. Shouldn't the pastor who makes $130,000 live better than the pastor? Shouldn't he be allowed to drive a nicer car, send his kids to better schools? The balance to this is always,
well, do you think we should live in dirt and eat dirt? And no, I mean, I'm certainly not saying that. But in North America, yeah, we can probably live a little bit higher than, we don't have to live like dirt, like the kids in Nicaragua or whatever. Not a problem. Right. But people say, well, I'm a conduit for God's money. Every conduit I've ever met has got a blockage in it. They say, well, we give a lot more. Yeah, but you know what? You're keeping a heck of a lot more. So I do have a problem with that. I think Jesus people need to be giving up a whole lot more money.
Well, the athletes, I think,
and you're good at that, Don. I know that behind the scenes. You are good at you are a good giver. Sorry to let me just interrupt that, but you're a good giver.
Well, one of the points that I'd like to make is that, you know,
well, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
All right. When people do the planning in terms of, particularly in the latter stages of their life, they really need to think about the kind of legacy that they're going to leave, not only to their kids, but also to charity. And, you know, there's a concept called the charity child, where you simply have 3 kids or 4 kids, but you add another child and you give that child to charity or donate to charity in equal shares. That's
great words of wisdom. Guys, we're basically out of time for this segment. Just want to thank you for taking the time to talk about this important subject. We'll be back with more Good News Sports right after this. Welcome back to the program. Listen, guys, it's easy to get in over our heads with debt. We want our toys and we want them now. Stop trying to keep up with the guys around you. Spend what you have with purpose and a plan.